All right, hope everybody's doing well on this Monday. Happy first day of spring practice for those who celebrate. Welcome to On Texas Football, special live edition of On Texas Football. I'm Jeff Howe, joined by CJ Vogel and Hank South. We're going to recap the Steve Sarkisian press conference. Sark met with the media after the first practice today. Hank, we'll start with you. Takeaways, we'll talk about practice, our practice observations as well, but your takeaways from Sark's roughly got about a half hour with Sark today, his meeting with the media afterwards.
Yeah. It sounded like a coach that's excited about his team and a coach that's obviously very understanding that it is day one of spring practice. So there's only so much you can glean from the first day of spring practice. A lot of new faces. He's talked about, instilling the culture, 40 plus new guys on this team, making sure, they're going about the right things. Always day one is fundamentals. You hear a lot of the coaches on the field today preaching the fundamentals, high and tight, kind of back to the basics. But in terms of, what Sark had to say, he likes this group. I think what I asked him in particular, in terms of, kind of the lost leadership, he rattled off about like 8 different names, I feel like, in terms of guys that are stepping up and the experience they actually do have back, despite, about to see a handful of guys drafted here in a few weeks. So Sark sounds like, he's excited. But again, he always talks about wanting to go back and watch the film. We're getting better from practice 1 to practice 2 and kind of seeing where we're at as we string some practices together.
CJ, what'd you take away from Sark today?
Yeah, very much the same thing. Look, I think he understands that there's a lot of talent on this team. Obviously, he was asked a couple times about individual positions and what the team looks like in general, but this is a guy that knows he has a lot of talent. You go out there, you add the best wide receiver in the portal, 2 all-conference running backs, a really talented NFL draft pick at right tackle, and yeah, it makes sense to be optimistic, not to mention what you return on the defensive side of the ball. Sark's big message today is we got a lot of individual players, right? They're all talented, very talented individual players. Now it's time that we must become a talented football team. That's the goal this spring. That's what they're working on in spring ball at the moment.
All right, so producer Matthew's got keyed up Sark's opening statement. So this was the opening statement from Sark today post-practice.
Shout out to women's basketball. Vic Schaefer, that was awesome. What a run for them in the SEC tournament to get ready for postseason play. And then obviously fired up for our men in their tournament coming up here this week. So that was really cool. I think that's always something here that kind of fuels you as a competitor at the University of Texas is seeing the other sports compete, and obviously what baseball is doing right now and softball. It's just such a high level of competitor that comes to school here. It's not just football, but I love that for our players to be around all the athletes, and for us today, like our first day on the grass in practice, and you could feel the competitive spirit, and not necessarily always across the ball with each other. I think competitively, internally. And I think that's what great competitors have, that internal fire to want to do it the right way. We got a lot of new faces. We're learning a new defensive scheme. And those guys from the Colin Simmons all the way down to the Tyler Atkinsons, who's first day here, of like, what does that fire and that competitive spirit look like, feel like, to try to get it right every time through. So, as always, it's day one, and there's little things that we've got to kind of get better for day 2. Whether it's quarterback center exchange, whether it's scramble drill and 7-on-7, which doesn't make sense to a lot of people, but we got to play the entire play to opportunities to make plays on the ball in the secondary to get interceptions. But there were some other things that I was really encouraged by. I love the effort that our defensive front played with, breaking from the stack, getting to the ball. You're not in pads, and so the ball's going to break a lot of the times, and we're in tag tempo. And so, all in all, it was a good first day. We got a lot of football. We got a ton of film to watch. And then one of the keys for us is how do we get better from day 1 to day 2 as the installation grows. And so, but for the first day, like I said, I thought it was a good day.
Shout out to CJ for making sure Bobby gets some camera time during the Sark opening statement. Hank, I'll say this. I'll kind of echo what Sark said. I thought for having 40 some odd new players and a lot of roster turnover, I didn't notice anything different than we usually see from a Sark practice, just in terms of the way it flowed. Everything seems as smoothly as you can. So I guess that's the benefit when you do turn over the roster, bringing in guys that at least have been on college practice before. I thought the first day was as good of a first day as you could hope for.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I kind of cut out a little bit. I'm outside Moody, so I'm trying to hear y'all. But yeah, no, I thought that it flowed really well. I thought for a day that that there could be more mistakes just because of the weather. The field was wet. There was a few slips, but I thought the practice flowed really well. I thought the quarterbacks were really efficient. I thought KJ Lacey taking first team, or here's the first one up with Arch kind of sideline watching it. I thought he threw the ball really well. Diabell for his first ever freshman practice, he looked up to his billing. Sark even noted, it's not like an overwhelming thing for Dia. Like, he's around football, he knows football. But yeah, the guys were running around. It seemed like a normal Texas football practice where you wouldn't know, like 40 plus guys just met each other 6 weeks ago. They seem like they've already kind of had some cohesion, time to get to know each other. I saw Arch and Cam Coleman chopping it up on the sideline and telling each other what they saw. So yeah, overall, I thought the flow of the practice was actually pretty impressive for day one.
Yeah, CJ, as we're looking at some film of Will Muschamp coaching up the Nickels, what'd you take away just from being at practice? We talked about your Sark takeaways, but your takeaway just on how practice flowed, or anything of note from today?
Well, the one note that I wanted to make sure we mentioned is, hey, we got a lot of new faces out there. Yes, it's both from the portal and the high school ranks, but essentially half of your starting offense is on the sideline, right? Arch, we did not see throw a football. He was not able to run or did not attempt to jog really at all, moving from one half of the field to the other. He was basically just a pedestrian. Sark did mention he did throw a little bit. Once media left, he said that was obvious, intentional. But again, you start looking at some of the names that we did not see. Trevor Gooseby had a helmet and pads, but did not participate in practice. He had none of the offensive line knee braces that you see all of these guys wearing in practice. Ryan Wingo warmed up, but he did not go through routes. I did not see Emmett Mosley out there either. So already there's four starters that we did not see today, which kind of gives you an understanding of how valuable this opportunity is for a KJ Lacey, for a Khalid Lockett, right? Some of these guys that are going to be fighting for snaps come the fall. Additionally, the list of guys that are dinged up at the very least on the defensive side of the ball is pretty darn long. Justice Terry was in a sling. No Ty Anthony Smith today. Xavier Filsaime and Zealous Hicks, we knew were going to be limited coming in. And freshman James Johnson was also a part of that limited group. So, yeah, it's a lot of talent that we're looking at right now whenever you see these practice clips. And all that to say, it can certainly get more talented when all of these guys get back fully healthy and in the mix.
Hank, I want to get your take on something Sark mentioned in the press conference. He was talking about Brandon Baker and Brandon Baker's size. And, I'm not putting words in Sark's mouth, but it sounded like he was saying, hey, look, yes, he's big, but we want to make sure he doesn't get too big. When you look at the offensive line now, Hank, it does seem like they've kind of rethought the big humans philosophy, where they still got guys that are big, but they're not big just for the sake of being big. It's almost like they realize, hey, maybe there's a cap here where we need to make sure that guys are still able to move. You take a look at Jordan Coleman, just looks amazing out there on the hoof, quite frankly. Like, he really does look like $1 million. But, they've still got size, Hank, but it looks a little different than it has the last few years.
Yeah, and, I think maybe that could be attributed to the fact that, they've had to move guys around to find their best five. So, maybe keeping guys more able and, I know Sark on Brandon Baker talking about, you don't want to add, mass can – you don't have to have, I forgot what the exact quote was, but he was talking about putting mass on Brandon Baker. And, but, the idea from it was, they thought about moving Brandon Baker they wanted to move Brandon Baker to right guard last offseason, but he ended up winning the right tackle job. So I think it just speaks for the fact that, they like the versatility they have. They needed to kind of shuffle it around in 2025 to find their best five when they did. And perhaps that's kind of now extending into, how they go about with their strength and conditioning and building these guys up in the offseason.
Yeah, a couple quick notes on the offensive line. Sark was asked about Lawrence Seymour again today. I hope that doesn't become a constant theme this spring, but no update. That will kind of get updated when it does. Jackson Christian, from what we could tell today, was the backup center, but Jaden Chapman and several guys working at that center position. CJ, go over to the defensive line and kind of to Hank's point and what Sark was talking about regarding Brandon Baker. Like a guy like Josiah Sharma seemed like he's reshaping his body a little bit. And if there's a good way someone can carry about 380 pounds, like Ian Jaffrard is just a massive mountain of a human being, but he can move a little bit at the listed 378.
Yeah, he could probably be. I mean, three of me probably equates to half of him, right? He's that large of a person. And we've seen big humans on this campus before, most notably a year ago, Nick Brooks was one of those guys, but we've seen Tavondre Sweat. We've seen some of those massive interior guys for the University of Texas. And, Jaffrard, quite frankly, probably is the biggest of them all, which – says a lot, right? 378 pounds is what he's listed at. 6'5" on the roster at the moment. I have it circled down here. He's just a big dude. But going to the rest of that defensive line room, look, Sark mentioned Hero Kanu and Murad Watson looking really good. He said Murad Watson looks like a different player today. He said Alex January was felt by the offensive line today. They saw exactly what that impact could be in the pass rushing game as well. And then Josiah Sharma said, quote, hands down, a different player today than what we saw at the end of the fall season. So we know what the strength of this team is and what that defensive line room could do moving into the spring and moving up this ladder in terms of positional rankings. It could be a top 2, top 3 positional room for you when it's all said and done.
Yeah, Hank, I want to stay on defense because you asked Sark about defensive leadership, and he mentioned several guys, but they've asked a lot of Colin Simmons from a leadership standpoint. And the good news there, based on what Sark said today when he was answering your question, he apparently, ever since the bowl game, has really stepped up and taken on more of a leadership spot with this defense.
Yeah. Like I said earlier, he rattled off about, at least 5 or 6 names because, I asked him, you lose a guy like Michael Taft, you lose a guy like Anthony Hill, those are voices in the locker room that aren't going to be there next year. And Hero Kanu, Colin Simmons, Ty Anthony Smith, Grayson Littleton, Lance Jackson, Jelani McDonald, but Colin Simmons notably, he talked about how he's really proud of how he and his mom, Sark mentioned Colin's mom, are really proud of the steps he's taken in his time. He said he's really grown up in his time at Texas. And I think that became more and more evident, I feel like last season is, the year started off a little rocky for him. He wasn't, racking up the numbers, like everyone thought he was. Sark said he's kind of pressing a little bit early in the season, but when he really kind of came alive in that last back half of the season, we started seeing him more at availabilities. We started seeing him, talking more, started seeing him, taking on more of a leadership role and just, even talking to the media and, giving other guys praise and, it's about his teammates, not necessarily him. So it sounds like Colin's really taken on the task to stand up and be a leader on this defense when, it's a unit that's going to need it with everything they've lost.
I'll add too on the defense, just from a coaching staff standpoint. If you wonder why Texas hasn't or didn't hire a Nichols coach, man, while we were out there, Will Muschamp was the Nichols coach. Like he grabbed Bo Masco, Grayson Littleton, and Wardell Mack. Blake Gideon had the safeties, Mark Orfe had the corners, and then Muschamp had the Nichols off to the side. So I don't know if that's going to be the case the rest of the spring. And Hank, that kind of ventures outside the leadership aspect we were just talking about, but I just thought it was really interesting. We knew Muschamp was going to have something to do with the secondary. And I think, again, that's Sark really wanting to get the pass defense figured out and fixed and not have it be really, other than 2024, it's been hit or miss. One other note, Sark did say he was asked about Mark Stoops. He said he hasn't been added yet. So apparently Mark Stoops not in Austin yet as a part of the staff. CJ, I want to go back over to offense real quick because you asked Sark about the offensive install, and this is something that we talked about. It could be a little more nuanced than in the past, just based on how many new faces you've got. But it sounds like Sark's kind of on at least from what he's saying, he's on the timeline he otherwise would be, even with all the roster turnover.
Yeah, typically 3 to 4 practices to begin the spring is your foundation. You lay the bricks, as Steve Sarkisian said this morning, and then you move into situational, 3rd down, 4th down, red area, 3rd and long. When you need a 2-minute drive, that's later on once you get basic fundamentals and foundations of your offense implemented in the spring. And as we've talked about, 40 new faces across the team. That will be going on both sides of the football. Defensively, specifically, look, they're building an entire new system on that side of the football with Will Muschamp. So that's going to take some time as well. Sark said, look, we have a very mature room at the moment. It feels like they're maybe a little further ahead on their schedule than in normal years, given some of the maturity and some of the guys, the way that they've attacked the winter conditioning. He also singled out Diabell for his maturity coming in and participating right away. So that's worth mentioning. This next week, they'll obviously be off for spring break, and then practice 4, I think, is when you'll really start getting into the individualization of practice with situational football being the focus.
Hank, whether it's somebody Sark mentioned or somebody you saw on the practice field, who are a couple guys that caught your eye today?
Yeah, I mean, I wrote on ontexasfootball.com. It's anything we say about Cam Coleman isn't going to surprise anybody. I think everybody thinks Cam Coleman's going to be a superstar. They're doing routes on the air. It's not like he has a guy guarding him, but I mean, he did it really well. It looked really good when he was doing it. I mean, he plucks the ball out of the air. He moves really well. He runs really crisp routes. So Cam Coleman looks like the real deal. On defense, I was watching the cornerbacks a little bit. I like what I saw from Bo Masco. I like what I saw from Smoke Matthews, the freshman. He was running, a little bit further back in the group, but Mark Orfe was coaching him up a lot. Kobe Black and Cade Phillips were kind of leading the cornerback drills, and then Masco and Warren Roberson with them as well. So I liked what I saw out of him. We've kind of seen this in the past where, everyone's on campus now. Like last year, we didn't see the spring transfers until the fall, but we've seen the transfers who come in, start in the back of the group, and, you kind of start to see them work their way up. Jack Indries didn't start with this, tight end one, or starting lineup with tight ends in fall camp last year, or even Matthew Caldwell in fall camp, I think, was the 4th quarterback up. And so we kind of see them start to feel it out, see what's going on, and eventually you see them kind of take that next step. But I think Bo Masco, I was impressed with the little bits we did see of him in drills today.
Yeah, I'll add too that Sark was asked about Michael Masunis. He said, "Look, tight end is a real," and he's not lying. He's truthful when he says that's in this setting where you're just running around in jersey tops and shorts. That's a tough position to evaluate. So he said, give him a few practices, but the tape suggests, and I think we all see the eye test suggests he's going to be a really good blocker in this offense and could be a key piece in the run game. CJ, what about you? Anybody either we haven't mentioned or that you just liked, or anything you heard from Sark today that really stood out?
Yeah, I'll just echo this real quick. Look, I think I mentioned it to you guys at the press conference this morning. KJ Lacey's going to play at Texas. I am dead set on that. I loved what I saw today. The ball zips out of his hands. I know the frame isn't necessarily ideal, but the arm is, and the accuracy is. And what we hear from Sark and sources and coaches and players and recruits, everything else says that this is a guy that moves the football when he's on the field. I'm a believer in KJ Lacey. These are valuable snaps for him coming in and working with the first team. Should something happen to Arch this year, I have a lot of confidence that Lacey will be able to run this offense. A few things I did want to mention as well. We did get an updated roster going into the practice this morning. A couple of heights and weights I want to mention. Justice Terry up to 287. John Turntine up to 284. So I know that we've been getting some questions on that at the moment. Lance Jackson, 272, 6'5", 272. How about that off the edge? And then obviously we talked about Ian Jafar, but 378. Texas has a boulder of a human being in the middle of that defense whenever they need him.
No doubt. All right, just a couple of things to wrap up again from the Sark press conference. And CJ put most of this over at ontexasfootball.com, so CJ and Barner from your notes. One quote that I thought was interesting from Sark, he did say that this is a really they're talented individual pieces. Now it's time to become a really talented team, so you're in the process of building it. He did say, I thought this was interesting, maybe top to bottom, the best they've been at wide receiver since he's been here. And they've had some really good wide receiver rooms. So I think that's that definitely caught my attention. And one other thing that he mentioned that I think is worth repeating, and I've talked about this on the channel, regarding Will Muschamp, you wonder, hey, not how motivated is Will Muschamp going to be, but how, he was extremely hungry the last time he was at Texas, his first go around. Where's the hunger? Where's the fire? And Sark said point blank, like, hey, he's not resting on his laurels. Definitely a different vibe to Will Muschamp than the last time he was at Texas. But again, that was, back in 2008, 2009. So I will say maybe a little more chill, subdued Muschamp this morning, but still the intensity's there. And Sark mentioned that everybody's able to feel it. We do have one super chat, so let's go ahead and get to it. Rocky P with the super chats at 1. It's Anthony Smith, really 205. Who are the top 5 off the bus players this year? Anthony Smith, I don't know, CJ, we actually saw him leaving the facility today as we were leaving. What do you think about Anthony Smith at 205?
I don't buy 205, but he has been very limited this year in terms of his physical activity. Of course, he's been dinged up. I don't buy 205. I think he's closer to 220, but we'll see. He played last year around 217, so it would be almost disappointing if he was down to 205.
Yeah. Hank, you want to nominate anybody for top 5 players off the bus on this team?
I'm looking at the roster. I would say, and you guys, weigh in too. I mean, Lance Jackson, I think looks like $1 million. Tyler Atkinson, Rocky Cummings. I mean, I know, he's not going to be a guy that's starting day one, but I mean, talk about a guy off the bus in the freshman linebacker. Going down the updates.
You mentioned earlier, Hank, you mentioned Smoke Matthews earlier. That was a guy. I mean, he and Hayden Howard both profile as kind of the longer, more physical corners that if you're going to play more man coverage, those are the kind of guys you need. You know who looked, I thought, exceeded my expectations, at least, on the hoof was Kosi Okpala. I thought he looked really – I only saw him – I didn't see much of the linebackers, but saw him warming up, and he's been putting some work in the weight room as well. They have him at 6'3", 239. Yeah, CJ, only the guy we mentioned would be Jordan Coleman. We're getting to work some first-team left tackle with Trevor Gooseby out. I thought he looked awesome. Yeah, absolutely. He received a lot of praise. While I know it was only up there for a little bit, Jeff, but he got some praise from Kyle Flood. Obviously, Darren Gatewood's been hands-on with this group as well. And look, I know Trevor Gooseby wasn't necessarily out there, but when you're tackles, your bookend guys on that offensive line look like Melvin Siani and Jordan Coleman. So that's what you want them to look like. Yeah, you're off to a pretty good start, and we'll see who ends up being the number 3 tackle. I will say that O-line group, Jonte Newman, maybe a little bit leaner, a little bit quicker than I expected him to be. I think he's Hank's got the roster in front of him. I don't. I think Jonte Newman's 304, 302, somewhere in there, 309. But yeah, just a little bit leaner than I thought he would be coming over.
302. Yep.
302. Okay. Thank you, Hank. Hank, I'll start with you. Any final thoughts, whether it's from Sark or practice or anything to wrap up our Monday here? Yeah, just thinking back to Sark, I thought one interesting question to him was, how do you motivate half your roster as guys that weren't here last year? And can you use kind of, we didn't get it done last year, let's get it done this year. Can you use that kind of as motivation? And Sark noted, he uses kind of a windshield analogy where, the windshield's big to, stay looking forward, but there's a reason there's a rear view mirror to look back on. So, you can probably guess that, they're using a little bit of last year to kind of fuel their motivation this offseason for the guys that are back, with losses to Florida, to Ohio State, especially coming to Austin in week 2. Then obviously, if they were to meet Georgia in a playoff or SEC championship type scenario. So I thought that was really interesting about how, as this team comes together, how they're going to use this spring to motivate into the fall. Yeah. CJ, any final thoughts? No, look, I think we're going to have a lot to cover over the next week going into the bye as well. So make sure to tune in on Texas Football. We got you covered here in the website. I know you, Jeff, I know Hank, I know Bobby, Jerry, Blake. We're all going to have a lot of input. We even saw Rod Babers out there today. So be sure to tune in tonight as well for the winning draft. Yeah. So again, thank you, CJ, for leading me in that direction. Make sure you get over to ontexasfootball.com. We've got, as a staff, notes and observations already posted from practice this morning. We've got the thread from the Sark press conference. We'll have plenty more over on the website and plenty here on the channel. As you see there on the screen, for those of you who are on audio only, $39.95 for 1 year of access over on ontexasfootball.com. That's a special promotion we're doing in conjunction with the start of spring practice. So make sure you get over to ontexasfootball.com and get signed up if you're not already. Also, make sure that you like this video and that you're subscribed to the On Texas Football YouTube channel. That way, whenever we drop a video or go live, you're not missing any of our Longhorn coverage. And as CJ said, make sure our next live stream will be tonight. The normal winning drive crew on Monday night. That is CJ, Rod Babers, and the coach Bob Shipley tonight, 7 o'clock. Don't be late, Sandman. Don't be late. Starting at 7 sharp, Sandman. If you're not there, too bad, so sad. But producer Matthew's at the controls. He'll get it rolling whether you're here or not. So make sure you're locked in, Sandman, and everybody else for the 7 o'clock live stream. All right. Again, thank you to Matthew behind the scenes for producing it. CJ, Hank, thank you guys for the knowledge and expertise as always. For CJ, for Hank, for For everybody hanging out in the chat, for producer Matt and the entire On Texas Football staff, I'm Jeff Howe. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And until next time, welcome.